There's just something inherently fun about controlling a character's movement while traversing a rough terrain. That's what made driving with Mako fun for me in Mass Effect, seeing the thing jiggle about while humping rocks. I had a little Donkey Kong handheld growing up, and I used to play the shit out of that game. Just the simple act of moving a character, assessing when it's best to move up a ladder, and jumping to avoid hitting those barrels made for many, many hours of fun. Games like Lode Runner and the original Prince of Persia took this simple concept and added a few notches of complexity to it, but the core of these games remained very simple. Move about, hit stuff before they hit you if that's at all possible, if not, simply avoid them. I think a good platformer, and I am by no means an expert on the genre, essentially keeps things simple. It's mainly in the design of the levels and how effectively the design keeps the player engaged doing the simple things of avoiding getting hit and moving about where such games should be judged, not on how much extra junk they add to the basic formula. I think the new Prince of Persia understands this very well, and it succeeds mainly because of it. From what I hear, the sequels to both the original and Sands of Time were very much focused on combat, which might be fun to play nevertheless if done well, but deviates very much from the spirit of the original Prince of Persia. The new Prince of Persia goes back to basic platforming, and it does this in a way that's even more elemental than what was present in games like Sands of Time. Basically, the game is an uber-simplified platformer. Some may find this to be problematic, but I find it quite refreshing. In my humble opinion, there's nothing more frustrating than repeatedly dying and starting over. And that's the first thing that I feel was done well in this game. There are no overly frustrating sections or sequences. Part of the reason is that there is no dying in this game. If you fall off a ledge and are about to plummet to your death, your companion, some chick who has really bad perm and access to super gel, will swoop down and rescue you, because she can magically float about when she needs to and place you on the last platform in which you had solid footing. When an enemy gets the better of you, she'll perform some kind of magical light thingy which will temporarily stun the enemy. This may remind some people of Bioshock and the Vita chambers, but it's not so bad here as it is in Bioshock, because for one thing, you're going to die a lot in this game. I must have died over 100 times in my run through, and it's not because I suck at the game, though I may. It's simply because it's easy to make mistakes while jumping over gaps and performing other acrobatic feats, unless you're ultra careful, which would make the game less fun to play. It's easy to mistime a jump, or misjudge a distance, or even space out and forget to push a button on time. Dying 100 times would inevitably lead to some frustrating moments in which I haven't saved in a while, and thus be forced to redo a good chunk of a game. I'd rather have a Vita chamber-like device set in a game if I'm going to die repeatedly, than have to consciously save before every running, jumping sequence I attempt. The second reason why there aren't any overly frustrating moments in the game is that the game makes moving about extremely easy. No, it's not some retarded running like that found in Assassin's Creed where you don't even have to control the jumping. You do have to press the jump button when you need to jump. You do have to follow certain button sequences to move past certain sections, but there's no need to worry excessively. Did I jump right at the edge of a cliff to ensure that I make it across? Did I press that button in that exact millisecond like I'm supposed to in order to grab that handle? The game is very generous in terms of allowing you time or space to execute your moves. For instance, if you're not exactly aligned perpendicular to the edge of a cliff and jump towards the other side of a ledge, the game won't punish you for it. In fact, it will often adjust for you. When you're tight-roping a narrow beam, you don't have to worry too much about going perfectly straight. And if you jump a little too early, you can always ask your companion to give you an extra boost by pressing another button so you can get across safely. Now, that may sound too dumbed down for some people, but when the sequences are semi-lengthy and they keep you visually engaged, it makes for some enjoyable and relaxing time. If you're the type that loves to play Guitar Hero on the most challenging setting and go all haywire with your fingers, perhaps this game isn't right for you. But if all you want to do is run around and jump about and solve puzzles and fight some enemies without pulling your hair out, this game is gold. Fighting is also well done. It's not overly complicated. You do have to remember some combos and basic rules, but at its essence, it's mainly about pressing the right button at the right time. And to make things simple, the game will tell you when to press the button, either directly by telling you what button to press and when, or indirectly by giving you visual cues such as enemy changing color, which means that you can only use certain attacks on it. You do have some freedom to move about and avoid attacks by simply stepping out of the way, and the game doesn't force action, meaning you can attack the enemies at your leisure. You don't have a health meter, but if enemy successfully attacks you enough times, it'll have you on the ground, at which point it goes in for the kill. If you press the right counter button that the game tells you to press, you kick the enemy off you. If you don't, your companion will save you with her blinding light attack, and the enemy will regain most of the health he lost since the last time he had you on the ground. Like I said earlier, it's not overly complicated, but it keeps things engaging by mixing it up and does require some thinking and quick reactions. And best of all, it won't be overly frustrating. The game is set in a pretty large, seemingly open world, but it's not open at all. The game is extremely linear, and you're essentially limited to moving only where the game's level design tells you to move, or where the plot leads you. But that's not a bad thing in my opinion. There are those that love games set in open worlds like Crysis or Ass Creed or GTA series or Oblivion, but I'm personally of the opinion that open worlds make for less memorable gaming than linear worlds with tightly scripted sequences guiding your experience. Those tightly scripted sequences make for some memorable scenes, and that's very much true for Prince of Persia. Without spoiling it for those that haven't played it yet, I'll tell you that the ending of a game serves as a reminder of what a linear game can do to provide for some memorable end fights and sequences. There are some things that do make me mad about the game though. For one thing, the writing is just piss poor. And normally I wouldn't care less about the writing in the game, with the exception being in RPGs. The story is something about some evil being corrupting the land, and you and a companion must go to specific locations, and you have to beat bad guys that guard them, and after doing so stand over the locations, press a knob repeatedly until your companion has an orgasm of sorts, and the locations become fertile all around her. It's not all that great, but it is serviceable. But what gets me mad is all the tweenie shit. The game is clearly written and designed to appeal to tweenies. The character you play is someone you like to punch repeatedly in the mouth just to shut him up permanently. You're guaranteed to find him slightly irritating if you've got any amount of pubic hair on you. He's this wisecracking, quote-unquote funny guy who appeals to absolutely no one except tweenies. He's got this retro feel to him, a very modern vibe in the way he moves. His sliding down steep angle sounds like skateboarders grinding, and the things he says. He uses modern and culturally Western idioms quite a few times. He's got this I'm really hip and with it thing going on, and the dialogue even feels like something that's specifically catered to tweenies, something you'd see in, say, Hannah Montana or some shit like that. There are predictable jokes and banters between your character and the companion that make you groan out loud, and all these sexual innuendos that just feel out of place because it's delivered through corny lines and contrived moments. Also, the oversimplification can be a bit much at times. For instance, it makes no difference whether or not you jump while running, because the distance you jump is the same whether you're running or standing still as you jump. Or you don't have to hang on to things. The game will find things to grab onto a little too easily and conveniently. Overall, the game could have used a few more notches of complexity to keep things a bit more challenging, but it's a minor complaint, at least for me, because the game does an admirable job of keeping things varied by throwing in all kinds of mini-games to balance the pacing and keep you engaged for 15 or so hours. For instance, there are these power nodes, or whatever they're called, that are thrown into the game. Basically, there are 4 nodes, all of them used for getting from point A to B. 2 of them simply take you there and differ only in how it takes you there. The other 2 requires you to steer a little to avoid bumping into things and breaking up the travel. It's not much, but it's still fun to do and especially a treat for the eyes. Or by throwing in some good puzzles into the mix. And they're not cheap trial and error or easy physics puzzles like those in other games. They actually require some thinking and are very much intuitive. Or I guess you could just go with trial and error, as I'm sure many tweenies would do, but at least it'll give you a slight brain buzz if you do decide to solve them without relying on dumb luck. Just a good combination of basic things and different variations thrown in that make for a fun experience. And yes, the game looks very good and stylish. The animations are top-notch. Your character pulls off all these complex moves and climbs impossible to climb walls and jumps long distances and hangs onto things for hours, but it looks alright. It's not like in the movie Spider-Man, in which Spidey looks like he's weightless and floating through the air. Your character moves believably and extremely fluidly. The game's a bit too bloom-happy for my liking, making things too white and shiny, and there were instances in which the bloom was just a bit too much and makes things difficult to see. I have nothing to say about sound. It had sound and music. They were both good. Not annoying to listen to, whatever. The voice acting was serviceable. The bad guys had a satisfying boom to him. The bad girl had a necessary shrill. The main character was tween-tastic, as were his baby eyes and washboard abs. The voice acting for the companion was very much subpar, but I guess the hair and her retro look and exposed belly button was what really mattered. So, tweenies and old folks rejoice. Prince of Persia is back, and it is as good as the long-running series has ever been.